Winded City Countdown, Episode 8. We're at it again, and we're back to sports. I'm not gonna lie, I think the people want us to go back to the sports. Not our best downloaded episode, but that's okay. I think Matt's suit scared people off. They thought we were maybe a little too fancy.
Bullshit. If they would have seen the video, we would have got twice as many people.
I'll be honest with you, Matt. I think it creeped people out that a guy that's 30 and living in his parents' basement.
I'm not 30 yet.
All right. Settle down there, mister. I'm 29.
Yeah, I still got a month.
Yeah, you do. You have officially 1 month until this happens.
to get my shit together.
It's not happening.
Yeah,
it's okay, though.
The lotto might hit. I don't know.
All right, do you play the lotto?
Nope.
Well, then you are SOL, my friend. Anyways, Episode 8, Winded City Countdown. We are going to talk trades tonight, right? Just like Matt hopes to trade in his parents' basement for a nice one-bedroom apartment at some point, we're going to talk about those trades that are good and bad in Chicago sports over the last 20 to 25 years and break down our top 10 list of things that we remember happening and going, oh, that's going to be really good. That's going to be really bad, and then talking about how it actually ended. So we're going to talk about those tonight. And then we got some nice discussion. I know, Ben, you're super fired up to talk some Bulls.
Yeah, I hate those guys.
That's the collective fan base talking, by the way. I think that's what everybody would say.
And I put in our preview here. You guys don't read the preview because I put this all together before we start the recording. But I put in there that we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between two teams in our city and the three others. Because I think, especially this past week, we really saw the line in the sand between the teams that really seem to want to be haves and the three teams that are right now the have-nots in the city. And I'm not, trying to rip on the White Sox when I say that, but, the Fowler thing, I think, is kind of a microcosm of who the White Sox are at the moment. And I think it's something that we will talk a bit about today. But we're going to do that at the end, so we'll make sure that we get through our list, and then if you want to stick around and listen to some somewhat current topics, we can do that. My dog's jumping up on the couch here. She wants to get involved in the trade talk, apparently. But anyways, thoughts on the list before we get started. Ben, you wanna talk at all about this list?
No, I mean, I think it'll kind of speak for itself as to what we kind of targeted. It was, the important thing I want to note, this isn't just like trades that, turned out well. Like what we were initially looking for when we made our list was the initial gut reaction. So like, I'll just say now one of our honorable mentions is the Jake Arrieta trade for the Cubs. The reason that one isn't on the list is because it didn't have the initial wow factor. When that one came across, you kind of looked and you went, okay, we were dumping a guy for maybe somebody who will work out. Obviously, it's worked out really well for the Cubs, and if we were targeting the best trade or best outcome of a trade, that's probably a top 2 or 3. But we were looking more for that initial reaction, whether it was good or bad. It was when that trade first comes across the wire. Did I go, oh my God, this is great, or did I go, oh my God, why did we do that?
Yeah,
those kind of things.
That Arrieta one was definitely just, here's a guy for another guy.
And let's see
which guy turns out well, and clearly for the Cubs that turned out well. So just to give you a little preface, the honorable mentions, as Ben mentioned, the Cubs acquiring Jake Arrieta, Jake Peavy to the White Sox. I considered putting that one on the list myself. I did not, and the reason was, that trade felt very much to me just kind of like, Jake Peavy has been dangled for years, and now he's finally traded after he seems to be not worth a damn.
It was after that shoulder surgery. I put it on there just because it was still a big time move. I mean, Jake Peavy was still, obviously with the injuries, he was still one of the better pitchers. Recently at that time, and the Sox went after it. That was why. I mean, Jake Peavy's still a big name, and he was still a big name, at that time. So
yeah, and for me, in retrospect, I remember when he was on the Padres, he had this stretch where they pitched him like a couple times in a row on 3 or 4 days rest down the stretch for a playoff run. And I always look at that and go, that's why you don't do that anymore. Because it seems like, and maybe this is just kind of one of those things that I'm thinking of it a different way, but it felt like when that was peak dominant Jake Peavy, and then after they kind of had that overuse, he was never quite the same guy. So I always think about that when people were yelling last year during the playoffs for the Cubs, like, "Oh, we got to start Arrieta on 3 days rest." It was like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. So, but anyways, and then our last one on the honorable mention was the Bulls trading Will Perdue for Dennis Rodman. Cool trade. I feel like today that'd be a better trade. Like I feel like that might be higher up if something like that happened today, because that was a high reward trade for sure. So honorable mentions there. But let's start with number 10, and this is the one. This is the first one I ever remember. I'll remember exactly. I was sitting in a chair with my son as my cell phone blew up from YouTube, and that was the Hawks trading Brandon Saad. And I think that one we can right now it looks like a pretty fair swap, and it's going to look even better if the end result is Andrew Ladd comes to Chicago for Dano, and so you look at that, and now that they've got the number 2, a second line center, and Anisimov. You've got Ladd coming over; he's going to play on the wing for Taves, and that's what you're going to ultimately get for Brandon Saad. I mean, that ends up, if we have a parade in 4 months, that ends up looking great. But 6 months ago, it was not exactly happy times. Matt, you want to talk a little about those unhappy times?
Oh, that was rough. This actually didn't make my list because it sort of slipped my mind. And then when I saw this, when Ben made out the full list, I was kind of surprised that I forgot this. But I was pretty crushed at the time, especially because I remember at the parade, Saad said he wanted to do whatever he could to get a deal done. And I think Stan Bowman even said, we're going to do what we can to keep Saad in town, which I'm sure they did. But I remember it was sort of one of those things where I think a lot of people insinuated that Saad may have been a bit too naive, I think, to really that maybe he just told his agent, go do what you got to do, and then they figured, look, we're going to just move you, and that's made the most sense for the Hawks. And like Scott said before, I mean, at the time, it was kind of a bummer, and you didn't think they really got much back. I didn't really love Anisimov, but the way that he's played, especially on that second line with Kane and Panarin, obviously that's working out pretty well. And to be able to move Dano for Ladd, we'll see where that goes in the next few months. But yeah, at the time, this one shocked me. I mean, as much as we all thought it could happen, I honestly didn't think it was really going to happen.
And I think bigger picture here, you look at the secondary trade that was made this week with the Hawks trading Philip Deneau for Fleischman and is it Weiss or Weiss? I
believe it's Weiss.
Right. So they trade for that, and a lot of people at first are like, oh, how can you trade him? I mean, that's your center for the future. But if you really look at what the Hawks have down the middle now, he doesn't have a spot. Right, that guy becomes expendable. Maybe he could have netted you something more in the off season, but where's he going to slot in? Because now it seems like they're going to put, Tavo in the middle on that third line. Kruger's going to come in. So this trade ultimately works out maybe being even better than we thought. Ben, your thoughts on the trade?
It was just an initial reaction. I remember when it first happened, I was really, really mad. I gave it about 24 hours, and I was fine.
I remember
you were definitely,
You made that video, remember? The Michael Scott-esque video of Goodbye, My Lover with the picture of Brandon Saad.
My friend. No, yeah, I mean, it was just the initial reaction was bad because I don't think I ever thought he was going to get traded. I thought it was as simple as we're either going to sign him to a long-term deal or he's going to sign that, that 2-year contract.
Yeah.
And that was it. So, I mean, initial reaction, I think, and then I think it goes back to the reason this one didn't make my list was it kind of worked out for the Hawks. I mean, you look at it as, you got Anisimov, you got a second line center who you've locked up to play with Kane, and obviously you brought back Ladd, who maybe there's a way they can keep him beyond this year. I doubt it, but maybe. So
reading some of the stuff on Ladd, and I know this gets us off topic, so I'll be quick, but reading some of the stuff on Ladd, I don't know that I want them to bring him back because he's like a power forward essentially, and his numbers are already starting to dip, and he's older than I thought he was. I mean, he's already 32 or 33. I thought he was 32.
30.
We'll look
Whatever,
that up.
it doesn't matter.
But he's already starting to dip, and so that may be enough. But anyways, that trade for me, though, it was just I think he was the one that we, even though we're in our 30s and shouldn't be wearing jerseys with player names on it anymore, Saad was one guy we all had discussed at some point going, man, that guy's jersey would look, I'd like to get that, and now, thank God none of us.
Ladd just turned 30.
He just turned 30. Okay. But his numbers are declining. So we'll talk about that later in the show. But good thing none of us took the splash on that Saad jersey. Because
yeah, that'd have been bad.
Although we would have definitely all done the Suki special on that one. So
yeah, true. I couldn't be that mad about losing $30, but whatever.
The Suki special. All right, going on to number 9, and this is one I forgot about. The Bears getting Brandon Marshall for 2 third-round picks in 2012. I think it's safe to say that we all walked away from that day going, Phil Emery, genius. And here we are 4 years later going, Phil Emery, out of football. Ben.
Well, he's back in, but yeah, I mean, this was, again, going back to what I said earlier, this was like that initial wow factor. It was, you had Cutler. I mean, remember that off-season Twitter conversation between Cutler and Marshall, and I think Tony Schefter was involved somehow, but whatever. You had that conversation. It was like, could this really happen? I mean, he was the best receiver the Bears have ever had. I mean, there's really no way around it. I mean, he was the best receiver the Bears have ever had. So I think, like I said, that initial wow factor, it was, oh my God, we got Brandon Marshall, and it was 2 third-round picks only. Yeah, in hindsight, I mean, you'd still do that trade 10 times out of 10, but, I mean, obviously the headache he caused there at the end, kind of set the mood for what his career was with the Bears, but there's no denying how important and how impactful he was, while he was here. So
I think it's also fair, and Matt, you as a guy who's covered the Bears a lot over the last few years, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe with a different coaching staff, maybe with this current regime of John Fox and Gase last year, maybe Marshall doesn't wear out his welcome quite as quick. I mean, the Trestman era for me, one of the defining moments was when they let that clown get in front of the camera for an hour press conference after like a week 2 loss or something, and he talked about his domestic violence. That doesn't happen today. I don't think the antics happen under a real coaching staff and not that stuff with Trestman. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I agree, because when he was in Denver, I don't know, I feel like that coaching staff with he was with McDaniels, correct, for I don't even know how many years. I'm not even sure if he was with Shanahan, but he was with a coaching staff that I don't think he respected. And then he was in Miami with Tony Sperano, and that was just
He was definitely with Shanahan because he was there with Cutler.
Oh yeah. And then eventually with McDaniels.
Well, because McDaniels chased Cutler out, and then Marshall wanted out because
he chased Cutler out.
Yeah, because he chased Cutler out.
And to Ben's point, I mean, I would have done that trade again in a heartbeat.
Yep.
And that first season, I mean, he broke, I don't know, he had 118 catches, over 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns. Like, he was unstoppable. You saw how good Cutler could be when he actually had, like, a viable number 1 wide receiver. And then Lovey got canned. And then 2013, that was just that whole year was that wasn't as bad as 2014. But 2013 was still, it was like a feeling out process. And then he still played fairly well, and you saw the emergence of Elshon playing alongside of him. And then, man, 2014 was just bad. But in retrospect, I would do it all over again. Everything that happened, I would do it all over again.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to leave it. You do it again, but you would. The one caveat I think we would all have is
much better coaching staff.
Do it with a better coaching staff, and
yeah,
unfortunately, I mean I think that moment is also just you felt so good about maybe where Phil Emery was trying to take this team, and then he just didn't put the pieces in place to support a player like that with the baggage he had. So, all right, moving on. Another Bears trade. We got a couple in a row here. Number 8 is going to be the Bears trading a first-round pick for Rick Meyer. Oh. Listen, I remember being 12 when this happened and going, hey, that guy. And little did I know, and maybe this is the thing I'm going to look back on in a few more years with Cutler, is teams don't trade big-time quarterbacks.
Not when they're that young, too.
Yeah, even back then, teams didn't trade big. Like, there's a reason that when you go down the list of all-time greats, it's one team. And one team for their entire career, unless they tried to, a Joe Namath with the Rams at the end of his career, or a Favre with, the Jets in Minnesota. You don't do it, and here we are. It's Rick Meyer, and then really quickly, I mean, I remember that going, this is Rick Meyer? Gross. Ben, is gross the right word?
I think it is, and the problem being in Chicago, too, is, like, he's a Notre Dame guy, so you knew immediately right off the bat everybody in Chicago was just going to embrace him because, we have such a big, obviously Notre Dame fan base that you kick aside the fact that he was terrible in Seattle. And it's not like he was there for a year and was bad and they traded him. I mean, he was bad for 4 years, and the Bears still gave the number 11 pick for him. I think that's the thing that really bothers me. It's like, it's not like, this guy was like one bad year. He was really good for 2 years. He had a bad year. He was terrible. Right. And, like, the fact that they gave him up, and, I mean, they had Warren Moon the next year, obviously, but, like, he was 41-year-old Warren Moon. Like, you gave away a 26-year-old quarterback with a 41-year-old to replace him. I mean, they didn't have anybody. I mean, it was
they were glad to do it.
And and my favorite is, so he plays 7 games for the Bears, 3 starts, 0 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Like, it's terrible. He was just terrible. And then, like, to go back, so Seattle used that pick that they got from the Bears, packaged it with another pick to move up to 3rd overall, took Sean Springs, who, Sean Springs was never a guy that you thought of as, like, one of the best corners in the league, but he was an All-Pro in 2004. But the guy played 14 years in the NFL, was a steady contributor. I mean, that's a hell of a career for a guy like that to be in the league that long, play that well. And so Seattle definitely got the better part of that deal, without a doubt.
That season with Rick Meyer, did we also have Dave Craig on that team, or was that the following year?
I don't even remember. Jesus Christ, he didn't have any touchdowns when he was with the Bears.
Nope.
0 touchdowns.
You traded a first-round pick for 0 touchdowns.
The only saving grace, and it's not even saving grace, but if I looked back at that draft, and, like, it was like Warwick Dunn and Tony Gonzalez, obviously maybe the greatest tight end ever, but it's not, there wasn't, I wanted to look to make sure there wasn't just, like, some, like, franchise-changing quarterback that they missed on. So that was, like, the only saving grace that I looked back on was that 11 pick that year. It was a pretty bad draft. So
the only thing they messed up on is they should have let Rick Meyer start 16 games, because then maybe you're as bad as the Colts and you go into that 98 draft.
Now
we're talking. All right, and then our final note, we have one more Bears one on here, but our final one for a little bit. The Bears trade Greg Olson for a 3rd-round pick in 2011, and this one proves the good coaches adapt to good players. Matt, would you like to comment on good coaches adapting to good players?
Terrible. I hated this. Hated this so much. Remember, I believe the year that he got dealt was that year that the 3 of us went to Bears Panthers together, had those 4th row seats. But terrible, because Mike Martz didn't like tight ends that could catch the ball. Mike Martz liked guys that could stay in, that could block. He wanted essentially an extra. He wanted that sixth offensive lineman.
Yeah.
So in his mind, it was better to move a talent like Greg Olsen, who could catch 60 or so balls a year, probably. Could push for 1,000 yards, receiving yards in a year. Arguably one of the more athletic tight ends in the league. And he decides, you know what, we're going to trade him because I want Brandon Manamaliuna in
For
here.
like $5 million, too.
Yeah, for a ton of money. Mike Martz.
I remember they trotted him off. Go ahead, Ben.
It was that uncapped year, that uncapped offseason.
Oh yeah,
Like,
because that was
signing
after
everybody.
after the strike or
The Bears gave everybody guaranteed money because I think that was Peppers, Manamaliuna, and was that Chester Taylor?
Chester
too?
Taylor.
And they trotted them all out for the big press conference. It's like, here's our big three. It's like,
Yeah, here's Julius Peppers. Here's
Here's
Julius
these
Peppers,
two
a
other
future
guys.
Hall of Famer, and fat ass Brandon Manamaliuna and Chester Taylor, who was hot garbage. And I also remember we saw a guy wearing a Chester Taylor jersey once, and I wanted to punch him.
Didn't Mike Martz, like in that prior offseason, before they traded him, say something to the effect of like, good coaches find ways to use good players or something
You
like
can find
that?
a way to use good players. Yeah. My defining moment. Go ahead.
And then he just didn't use them, and then trades them, and was like, "Oh."
He didn't know what the hell he was like. Martz, the game passed Martz by.
unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the best offensive minds in the game in the early 2000s.
Yeah, like 10 years earlier than when the Bears got him.
Yeah, and then he lost it because he couldn't adapt. He failed to adapt, and apparently good coaches do adapt to the game and can make good players work, and that's why he's not a good coach.
And he's
As
on
you can,
TV
as you can
making
tell,
stupid
as you can
comments.
tell, I love Mike Martz.
We all do a
Clearly.
little bit in some way. Number 6. Let's switch gears, and we're gonna talk the Cubs acquiring Derek Lee for Hee-Seop Choi. This was the fall or the winter after the Cubs got taken out of the playoffs by the Marlins. Stupid. And I remember when this trade came through, there was that initial gut reaction, and if you guys think this is stupid, please tell me. It probably is. But I remember reading that going, we don't need that guy. Screw that guy. We're going to win the World Series next year without him. And then I realized, like, yeah, this is a really good first baseman that the Marlins gave away for bad things. So,
Yeah, I mean,
good job.
This was, Hee-Seop Choi. I still got his autograph on that baseball with Bobby Hill and Corey Patterson, just waiting for that thing to cash in. But remember, I believe this was the year after Hee-Seop Choi fell over the foul line and cracked his skull on the field and couldn't play anymore. So when they made the trade, it was like, man, it's a great trade because you're getting a Gold Glove caliber first baseman. Then obviously, remember, Derek Lee just went off with the Cubs. I think it wasn't 05. I think it was 05 was his year he should have won the MVP, but he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he just went nuts, and I mean, it was just a great trade. I remember seeing it, I'm like, okay, we're shoring up at first base. We got a Gold Glover. He can hit. The Marlins. We cashed in on the Marlins, trading everybody away again. And you didn't give up. You gave up Hee-Seop Choi again, who had a crushed skull from the foul line, and another player by the name of Mike Nannini, who I've never heard of, was also traded.
This trade just screams of how cheap the Marlins were. Would you agree with that, Matt?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was for them. It was about moving money, well, not even really moving money. I guess moving the potential of money because they
weren't going to pay him.
Yeah, they weren't going to pay him. So, and and to Ben's point on 05, that was the year he flirted with the Triple Crown too, because I mean his home run numbers slowed down, but I mean the guy hit 46 home runs, batted .335, wow, and finished third at MVP voting. But
I think he only had 92 RBIs or something like that.
Yeah, that team was terrible. Wasn't that the
he had
05 team that was
107.
awful?
Was it 107? I thought it was 90 something.
Yeah, I think that team was pretty bad too.
Yeah, I don't think it was good at all. That was 2005, right?
Yeah, they were 79 and 83.
Oh, that was the year the White Sox won the World Series.
No.
Even better. Yeah, 79, just the epitome of mediocre. Right there.
Yep.
Along with the rest of the league, though, looking at the standings, Florida 83 wins, Mets 83 wins, Nationals 81 wins, Brewers 81, Cubs 79, Diamondbacks 77. The Padres won the West with 82.
Yeah, a whole lot of bad.
That's a lot of bad there. All right. So that is number 6 and number 5. I didn't have this one because I never remembered it. I actually, until it was on the list, I was like, that's how they got him. White Sox acquire Paul Konerko for Mike Cameron. I'm gonna just sit this one out because literally, I had no idea that that's how they got Konerko until
This was actually one of the first ones that I thought of. Oddly enough,
Yeah.
for me not being a White Sox fan, but because at the time it's not like Konerko was this great player. I mean, he eventually developed and turned into.
I think that's where I differ. He in '97. So this was the year before he was traded. He was the number 2 overall prospect in baseball. And he was traded from the Dodgers to the Reds. But the Reds also had Sean Casey, so it was kind of the which one do we pick? And his quick call up with Cincinnati wasn't very good, but I think that you got a guy who was just the 2nd overall prospect in baseball. You got him from Mike Cameron. I mean, that's unbelievable. Mike Cameron has always been an okay player, but
hey, he hit 4 home runs in a game.
He did.
Yeah,
well, the thing with Mike Cameron always had that potential that you thought he was going to be really, really good. So everybody continued to buy into that for whatever reason. So, but I remember this deal happening, and I vaguely knew Konerko's name, but Mike Cameron to me was a big name at the time. So that's why it was a memorable trade. And in the end, I mean, Mike Cameron was a fine baseball player, but the career that give Konerko credit, he had one hell of a nice career. Not a Hall of Fame career, but he's one of those Hall of Very Good guys.
Yeah. Would you guys say that this trade is, when you look at not necessarily the wow factor, but you look at what the end result of the trade is, would this be one of the 3 best trades ever in Chicago sport of all the teams?
I really have to sit there and look through it, but yeah, I mean, it seems.
I mean, look at the career Konerko had. I mean, Jesus, the guy's, if anything, he's underrated for what he was able to accomplish. I mean, he got he was there for the World Series, obviously. Yep. I mean, he's an all-star. I mean, he's always been
6-time all-star.
How many years about the team, just the leadership aspect of it? I mean, this was a guy that they begged to stay around because what he brought, on the bench as well. So,
how many years removed are we from that year that he was hitting 400 up to the All-Star break? Was that only? That's only 3 or 4 seasons ago, isn't it? He was.
Well, I mean, he finished 2010 and 2011 over either 300 or better. So.
But one of those years, I swear, he was flirting 400 up to the.
I vaguely remember that he was really.
And then he turned into Paul Konerko, and which is
not that there's anything wrong with that. Yeah.
He was always noted for being he would either be really, really good for the first half or really, really good for the second half, but he could. I remember there was seasons where he was dominant for half the season, then he was really bad, then he was really bad for the first half, and then he was really good.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, it's what they always say is where at the end of the year his numbers always match the back of the baseball card. It's kind of Paul Konerko. I mean, he was always really
gonna
really
bat
good.
280. That's pretty much a given.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what separates him from being Hall of Fame versus Hall of Very Good. If he would string together more complete seasons, maybe he ends up in the Hall of Fame. All right, and on to our last for the 4 through 10, and I really can't believe that this one's not higher, because I remember when it happened, I jumped up from my computer and was just like, this is it. It's going to happen. And that's the Cubs trading for Nomar Garciaparra. That's an awful Boston accent. Jimmy Trolley would not.
He would not approve.
He'd say some bad words to me. But at any rate, Ben, the Nomar trade.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I think I had it 3rd or 4th, so kind of right where it's at. In hindsight, I probably should have had it higher. I kind of agree with you there. But just, you look at when you got him was, I mean, he was having a pretty good season, I guess, but I think just my memory of him being a Cub kind of
Yeah.
dampens what actually turned out of it. I mean, he just kind of stunk after he was, as soon as he was traded to the Cubs.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, just I remember the trade, and like then you look and they really gave up nothing to get him. I think that was the important part, is you got Nomar and our good buddy Matt Merton, and you
Coming
gave
home.
up a bunch of, you gave up Alex Gonzalez, the guy who cost the Cubs a chance at the World Series, along with Dusty Baker.
You bitter there, Ben?
What?
Is that a bitter
They
Ben?
gave up Justin Jones, Francis Beltran, and Brendan Harris. So you gave up nothing. And you got Nomar and Merton, who ended up being a decent player. But, yeah, I mean, I think in hindsight, probably should have been higher. But, yeah, I think, like I said, what he ended up being as a Cub kind of hampers where I think this ended up on my list.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna say, like, I oddly didn't put this on my list. I don't know how I forgot it. In all, like, I
This
remember
was the first
where,
one I thought of.
I remember where I was. I was in Milwaukee with some friends, and another friend called me, and he's like, and I answered him like, hello, and he's like, no ma, and I was like, what? I was like, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, dude, the Cubs got Nomar. I'm like, yeah, okay, and like hung up on him. And that was back in the age. I can't check it on the internet. Twitter wasn't around. SportsCenter wasn't picking that stuff up. And then like I later got another call from him, and he's like, no, dude, I'm completely serious. They got Nomar. But I'm with Ben. I think what happened after the fact sort of spoiled it for me.
Yeah.
And I guess our expectations were probably too high too, just because of
And
the guy
maybe,
he was and the player he used to be.
and maybe for me, I think Ben had that bitterness about the Noma, like about Alex Gonzalez, right? And I think for a lot of people, when that trade happened, we always all felt, I'm speaking for both of you, and I assume this is true. I think we always felt that the weak link in that Cubs lineup, top to bottom, was shortstop.
Yes.
Right? Like, I'm not off base with saying that, looking at that 03 and 04 year, right? And this is after you've brought in Derek Lee to play first base. Ramirez is playing a full season at third, right? You've brought in Maddox. You've got Wood, Pryor, Clement, and Maddox, and Zambrano going 1 through 5. It just felt like that was the piece.
Yeah, on paper, especially if you were getting Nomar. And, obviously the injury happened, so you didn't get that. But on paper, Cubs had one hell of a lineup. But
Right.
I guess that's just sort of the way it goes with the Cubs, or used to be, I guess.
Sometimes it happens. All right, so to recap, 4 through 10, 10, Hawks trading Sod. 9, Bears acquire Marshall for 2 third-rounders. 8, Bears get Rick Meyer for a first-round pick. Yeah. Bears trade Olsen for a third-round pick. Another bad one. Cubs acquire Derek Lee for Hee-Seop Choi. Great trade. White Sox acquire Canary.
Uh-oh. Scott went off the rails there a little bit. He's
and the Cubs acquired. It ends up just being some guys getting traded, but the excitement was there, and that is what this list is all about. All right, we're gonna venture into basketball land now. We got one Hawks trade, we got a couple Cubs trades on here, we got a White Sox trade. We've talked a lot of Bears. We haven't talked Bulls yet, and I think this trade right here. Who's the GM for this trade, Ben? This is Pax, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know Ben's feelings on Gar Pax right now, and we'll talk about that in another 9 minutes here. But LaMarcus Aldridge for Tyrus Thomas and Victor Kriapa. Now I will say, when this trade happened, I was furious because I was excited that they got LaMarcus Aldridge because I thought Aldridge could be a real player. And I have an affection for big men in the NBA draft. I really think at least I used to. I mean, now the league's changing, but back then, you're getting a 7-footer to come, anchor the middle of your team for, what could have been a long time. He did it for 9-10 years in Portland. He was their anchor up there, and they made a lot of playoffs because of him. And now he's going to go win a title, maybe in the next couple of years in San Antonio, but. I know I had questions about Ty Thomas. What did he show us? some stuff at
he
LSU.
he got drafted where he did. I mean, he obviously was a good college basketball player the 1 year he was there, but he made his name in the tournament. I mean, he was dominant in the tournament, but it goes back to what you said. I mean, this was still 10 years ago when centers were ruling the NBA, and we had the chance to get, obviously I'm not going to sit here and say that he was ever the best center in the NBA, but I think he was certainly always a top 3 or top 4 for sure. I mean, he was projecting to be the guy, and you gave up him and a second rounder, which in the NBA doesn't mean anything,
Right.
for Ty Thomas and Victor Kriapa, and it just the ultimate backfire. And this is where I don't understand what that trade was. And I mean, I guess the biggest part is that I always go back to is if Ty Thomas was your guy, why were you not taking him at 2? And like, was Victor Kriapa that important to you that you wanted to take our Aldridge and then trade him? Like, that's where I get confused. Where it's like, I don't see how getting Kriapa for a second rounder tilts you to take Thomas or takes you to, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't make sense to me. Didn't make sense to me then. There's 2 times I know I was correct with the NBA draft. 1 time I was wrong. I'll openly admit I thought the Bulls should have taken Michael Beasley over Derrick Rose. Boy, was I wrong with that. But this one, and I said all along Kevin Durant should have been taken over Greg Oden, and I couldn't have been more right on that one. And then this one, I said all along you should have kept Aldridge. I didn't like Ty Thomas.
Just a quick Aldridge, 5-time NBA All-Star, and that's 2012 through 2016. So he really put it together a few more years after the draft. All NBA second team last year, 2-time NBA All NBA third team in 11 and 14, all rookie team his first year in 07. So some nice honors there, and some nice seasons in Portland. So Matt, go ahead. Jump in.
I mean, it was just that Bulls, especially like mid-2000s Bulls, they weren't that bad, and they had some decent young talent. Luol Deng, Ben Gordon, Heinrich was still young then, was a decent enough player. Man, I feel like he would have been such a nice fit in that team, and you had Ben Wallace, which, I mean, you had a starting lineup of Ben Gordon, Kirk Heinrich, Luol Deng, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Ben Wallace. That's not that bad. And you had guys like, Cephalosha and Nocioni and stuff, Duhan coming off the bench. Like, that wouldn't have been that bad, but that is such a bad trade. I thought it was terrible at the time. I didn't like Tyrese Thomas's game at all because he was a big, lanky guy that, like Scott said before, where I'm like Scott, I've always had an affinity for big power forwards, big centers in the NBA that can post up, and the Bulls have been looking forever for that post-up guy that can get down on the block, make his
And then you
own
had
shot.
him, and you traded him.
Yeah, you had him, and you traded him for a guy that could dunk. And that was Tyrese Thomas's best asset, and he wasn't even that good at that.
There are so many things with the Bulls that I always will look back on. And it feels like a lot of stuff with big men. Like, I always go back to Eddie Curry. I remember when they drafted Eddie Curry going, oh, that could be good. And then I heard he scored 0 points in the high school championship game while he was at Thornwood, I think is where he went to high school. Thornton, yeah. And I just looked at that. I went, wait, we spent the second overall pick on a guy who couldn't score a point in high school basketball? No, thank you. All right, number 2, another Cubs one, and again, this is a fleecing here.
Oh yeah,
this
without a doubt.
This goes down as the all-timer for what were they thinking in Pittsburgh? But this goes back to you got the Garrett Cole stuff in the paper this week about him wanting that money and the Pirates kind of being cheap. Well, here you go. Cubs acquire Ramos Mears and Kenny Lofton for a bucket of baseballs and Bobby Hill.
Important thing to note on that, it was actually it was Jose Hernandez, so let's not. He's a little bit better than a bucket of balls, but somehow the Cubs also managed to get cash out of the deal, which
that's what's
still don't understand.
That's even crazier. Yeah, the fact.
I guess we'll take these guys, but you're gonna have to put some of the bill.
Yeah, like that's just amazing. Yeah, we'll do it, but we want some money.
It's like going out to dinner with someone, and you got a salad, they got the scallops, and you leave there and you've split the bill in half somehow, and you're like, wait, how?
What?
I only ordered a salad. How did I end up paying for that half of that guy's scallops? This is ridiculous. That's what this trade was.
Yeah.
That's the best way to describe this trade, and it really was, you know. And I had on my list, I had the Antoine Vermette trade and the Andrew Ladd trade for this year. And part of why I wanted those trades on this list is the same reason I love this trade, was I remember that trade happening and going, this is the front office saying, we believe we can do this. And I always love those trades. Those are some of my favorite trades when, you've got a team that they've got a shot to maybe win it all, and the front office says, yeah, you're right. Here's some guys to go and get. And I remember seeing this trade going, this really does fill a need. And I'm not saying like it's the difference between them winning or losing the championship, but I'm just saying like I love those trades where you have a front office that makes a move that's not just, for an example, the year the Sox won the World Series. Not that they needed to make a trade, but they go out. What was it? Jeff Blum, is that right? Am I thinking right? That was like their big trade at the deadline.
I believe so, yeah.
Right, and it was one of those moments where like I thought to myself when the Sox did that, I was like, man, like maybe a bigger trade shows more confidence. It obviously didn't matter, but I always love those types of trades.
But this was a trade. I think that's a little stretch with the Ladd and the Vermette one, because they were getting pieces to fill. Ladd obviously fills a higher one, but I mean, you're making this trade no matter what, because you just got a 25-year-old third baseman who a year before that had 34 homers, 112 RBIs, hit 300, had a 350 on base. I mean, this wasn't necessary. I mean, this obviously was a trade that helped you in 2003, but this was a trade that helped you for years. I mean,
I agree with you, but it just
This wasn't just like a rental.
And it was like, yeah. And Ramos was like on the cusp of entering his prime. You know what I mean? He wasn't even like entering his prime. He was on that step before entering his prime.
No, I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm just saying, like,
I mean, I understand where you're coming from.
These trade deadline deals, so often, I think it's important to look at it and go, this is a general manager and front office staff that's looking at the team as currently constructed and going, yeah, if we make some of these moves, we could win a championship. And you're right, Ben. This trade is bigger than that.
You knew that something was coming that year, because remember that's the year that Corey Patterson was on a tear. He tore his ACL going through first base. You knew they needed help in the outfield.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Mark Bellhorn started the year as their third baseman. They traded him to Colorado for Jose Hernandez. So all these moves were just adding up to them doing something bigger. And I mean, I don't remember who they were playing exactly, but I remember like Hendry coming in the box in like the 6th or 7th inning and announcing the trade, and it was just like you started thinking, it's like, oh my God, who did they get rid of? Who did they get rid of? And they gave up nobody.
And you didn't hear a single name.
No, it was not. You gave up nothing.
I remember this trade too. For some reason, it just sticks out, like the old ESPN splash page. And when there was that breaking news, like you'd always look into the upper right-hand corner of the page, and there's like that white box that would appear if there was a breaking news. I remember this trade being in there going, all right, Cubs are in here. What is this? And that's how I heard about it. And then, like you bet, I remember then turning on the game, and they had Hendry in the box going, oh yeah, suck it, Pittsburgh.
It is amazing. It is amazing that they got him. I mean, Aramis essentially he's obviously the big key part of that deal, but to get him from a rival, division rival for essentially nothing is pretty remarkable.
I loved Aramis Ramirez too. Probably one of my favorite Cubs.
Yeah, me too. I'm with you. Oh, he was a solid part of that.
Especially love the Caesar salad. One of my favorite moments.
Totally.
All right. So here we go. Let's wrap up the list, and we'll get to some of these trade talks. Number 1, and it's an obvious number 1, and it
should be obvious.
Yeah, it's the Bears acquired Jay Cutler. So, Ben, you start us off here. because I have some thoughts and
This is one where I remember exactly where I was.
Yep.
I was in fabulous Las Vegas. I had just gotten eliminated from a poker tournament on just a bad beat, man. But anyway, I'm in. I go to the sports book and I sit down, and there's you start hearing some things. It's like somebody got traded. Like, okay, like what's going on? Like it sounds like the Broncos traded Cutler, and then all of a sudden, like you start hearing the Bears, and next thing you know, it's on ESPN that the Bears acquired Jay Cutler, and I was in disbelief. And I remember walking back to the poker table. My cousin Joey was playing still in the tournament, and I whispered to him. I said, "The Bears just traded for Jay Cutler." Immediately, Joey doesn't even look at his cards, goes all in, gets eliminated, and we come back and we look at it, and it's just, I mean, this is, you go back to what I said about Aramis Ramirez, where you got a 25-year-old third baseman. Well, you just got a 25, 26-year-old quarterback who, if I'm not mistaken, was coming off of a Pro Bowl year or a very good year either way.
Yep.
And I mean, yeah, the price was high. Like we can sit there and beat that, beat that to death.
I don't think, you know what though, Ben, in retrospect.
Yeah, in hindsight, you say that, but
at the time, a Pro Bowl quarterback entering his prime, 2 first-rounders and Kyle Orton,
it was and a third
up in an instant. In an instant. Well,
and a third, but
yeah, and anybody that says they would hesitate for that, like we texted a little bit today about Alshon and getting the tag and what team is going to give up 2 first-round picks. The only position in this game today that you can give up 2 first-round picks for is quarterback. And anybody that looks back, and I love the meatball callers that's called like the score in Chicago, and they're like, "Oh, I thought that was a bad trade from the start." No, you didn't. You're a liar.
There's nobody that said, "Oh, we should have never got Cutler." There's no way.
Kyle Orton was our guy. No, he wasn't.
Yeah.
Kyle Orton's a neck-bearded asshole that's that didn't do anything in this league. Jake
I don't know if I call him an asshole, but whatever. You seem very upset with Kyle Orton, but
no,
anyways,
it's not Kyle Orton. It's just
I know.
Kyle Orton
It's
gets
people.
roped
It's
into
people.
the-
It's people that want to place him higher on some scale for whatever reason. But totally, I know what you mean. Me personally, like Ben, I remember the moment. I remember seeing it on TV. I was at work, and I went, "You what?" Like, no, and then you gotta wait for the scroll to like come back. So I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, did I read that right? And it comes back. I'm like, holy shit! And I called my dad because I was so excited. And then my dad is very much a Bears fan, but not much of like an NFL guy. So I'm calling my dad. He's like, and he's wondering why I'm calling him while I'm at work. He's like, hey, what's up? I'm like, Bears just traded for Jay Cutler. He goes, who's that? I was like, Dad, he was a first-round pick. I was like, he's a first-round pick quarterback. He's a Pro Bowl quarterback. The Bears have their quarterback for the future. And he's like, nice. And like, I was so excited. I was like texting people, like, can you believe it? They got Cutler. And as much as I've always been a Cutler guy, and whatever people can.
I think we all have.
The 3 of us have all been Cutler guys. But for me, I would do the deal. I would do the trade again, knowing everything I know now. Just because of the way the NFL is, the way quarterbacks are, the way it is to acquire quarterbacks. The NFL, it's very top-heavy with like 5 or 6 really good quarterbacks, a handful of average quarterbacks, slightly above average quarterbacks like Cutler, and the rest of the NFL is hot garbage at the quarterback position. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
And I think anybody that sits here and talks about Cutler as though we've gotten nothing out of that. He did take the Bears to the NFC title game. And if he
faked an injury though, I mean, come on.
Yeah. Ask Maurice Jones-Drew.
And here's the thing that I will always point to when people are like, "Oh, that injury, that fake injury." Brian Urlacher hates Jay Cutler. I think that's pretty evident. Yes.
He strongly dislikes him, correct.
At the very least, it's a strong dislike, but he probably hates him. And even Urlacher after that game went, "You're being stupid." He would not at that point go, I'm quitting on my team. No freaking way. And Urlacher's like, "No, that guy's tough. Like, he's an idiot, and I hate him, but he's tough, right?" Like, so I hate that argument. But he took you to one NFC title game. If he doesn't throw, if Johnny Knox doesn't break on that route wrong, causing an interception, and Cutler busts his ass down the field to make a tackle. Who knows what happens that year, with that team. And then, even in the Trestman era, Cutler played a brilliant game against Green Bay in Week 17 and almost got you to the playoffs.
And he got Chris Conte,
Yeah, and for all the faults that people have in Cutler, I don't know that over the last, however many years, I don't know that I've ever looked at Cutler and gone, yeah, that's the problem with our team is the quarterback position. Because everybody wants to sit here and go, oh, Caleb Haney have been great. Caleb Haney sucks. And I'm not saying Jay Cutler is the greatest of all time.
He's way better than Caleb Haney.
He's light years ahead of that guy. So there it is. That's your list, 1 to 10. Starting from the top, Bears acquire Cutler in 2009. 2, the Cubs acquire Aramis Ramirez and Kenny Lofton. 3, the Bulls trade LaMarcus Aldridge for Ty Thomas and Victor Kriapa. And 4, Cubs acquire Nomar in 2004. And then we have the 5 through 10 that we talked about earlier. But there's your list. Good list. Would you agree? Yes?
I would agree. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, list-wise, yeah, some of the end results of these trades not so much, but I guess that's just Chicago sports for you. But this is a fun one. I'm glad. Last week was fun doing the Oscar stuff and doing the Shawshank movies, but this is obviously our bread and butter, so this is fun. Glad to get back into the sports thing. Back to talk sports.
Talk more hockey.
Talk more hockey.
All right, so we're 50 minutes in now. We're done with the list. We're now going to talk current events. So if you're listening to this a week, 2, 3 weeks later, shut the podcast off now because this is old news. We're done with it. It might be in a couple
I'm
weeks.
sure the Bulls are still going to be complete hot garbage in weeks from now.
For sure. So let's get into it. So like I told you guys at the start, when I wrote the description for this show, I called out that we're going to talk about the differences between 2 of the teams in this town and 3 of the others. And so on one side of town, you have a Cubs team where the hitting, the pitching is a different thing because I think everybody that's a Cubs fan is looking at the pitching going, the pitching's good, but it would still be nice if
For the record, their pitching is rated like, I want to say their starting rotation. I think ESPN did like a breakdown. I've seen a couple other. They're like top 4 or 5 starting pitching staff in baseball.
Are they really that high?
Yeah.
Wow.
Higher than I thought they'd be, but they're pretty damn high.
I think it's fair to say though, if there's one area that we're concerned about, it's the pitching, not the hitting, right?
Yes.
Right.
I mean, I guess there's the fear that there may be some slumps from the kids, but. Yeah, the pitching on paper is the thing I think that's the most scary to ever. Not even scary, that's not the right word, but the bigger concern, if there is a concern.
Yeah, if the Cubs don't end up winning 100 games, it's going to be because, or winning 90 games even, it's going to be because maybe the pitching wasn't, John Lackey really is a 37-year-old pitcher. Kyle Hendricks, is what he really was at the end of last year. Jason Hamels is done being a pitcher even in the first half. Adam Warren doesn't work out. And then you're back to what you had last year, which is Lester 1, Arrieta 2, and you're just hoping for the best 3 through 5. And maybe you don't quite catch the lightning in the bottle you did.
Yeah, and I guess and the good thing is the Cubs have done a lot this year or this offseason to add a bunch of arms. They've got a lot of options, which is obviously really good. And you never know what might come of somebody like a Trevor Cahill might all of a sudden figure out or prove that he could be your 4th or 5th guy, and so they've done a nice job of adding those guys in.
Go ahead. So to the point here though, we all look at Twitter this past week, and Dexter Fowler, who we thought had no business coming back to the Cubs because the Cubs weren't going to do it, but as written by Ben Russo a month ago.
Nostra Russo.
Right. The Cubs trade Coughlin, bring Fowler back, make him, and then bulk up your outfield and put him in center, move Hayward over to his natural position in right as a Gold Glover. And that's the move. And here's the Cubs. And, if they don't sign Fowler, I think we're all sitting here going, all right, this team is good. The projections are great. Let's go. And the Cubs are still tinkering and trying to get better. And then that brings me to the other of the two teams that are doing things, and that's the Hawks, who have won 3 cups in 6 years. They don't have to win another one. They really don't. Like, if they don't, they still get to look back on this era and go,
yeah, I mean, it's still obviously the ultimate goal is to win a Stanley Cup, obviously.
Because
but the fact,
4 cups gets you into real.
That's big boy territory there. That's Montreal Canadiens sort of stuff.
Canadians, Islanders, Oilers, Red Wings are the 4 teams that have done 4 in like a 10-year span.
Because hockey's so unpredictable, especially now in the current landscape of it, and
right.
haven't had a repeat winner since Detroit, and when was that? I don't even remember.
02, 03, maybe something like that.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
So that brings us to the big part of the conversation. The Hawks and Cubs seem to be playing chess, and Ben's favorite team that I'm going to let him have just a solid rant time about here. I don't even know if you'd call it playing checkers. I think they're playing Candyland. They're just drawing cards and moving across the colored spaces and having no strategy at all. Ben, what the fuck are the Bulls doing?
I don't know. But before I jump into the Bulls, I want to do 2 things. I don't know that I'm necessarily going to put the Cubs in the Blackhawks class yet because it's only been – I mean, it's really this offseason. I mean, last offseason you can say, yeah, because they made the splash for Leicester. But this offseason is the year they really went for it. So I don't want to sit there and say they're on the same level as the Hawks because – Let's win one before we start crowning them as these great.
No,
but I understand what you're saying as far as at least they're going for it. They see their window and they're going for it.
Yes.
They're doing something. But on the flip side of it, I would also add they understood what they were as a team 4 years ago when they broke it all down and started from scratch.
Right.
So they understood where they were at. So they have front offices who are making the right moves to build for the future.
The last 4 years, even the painful stuff has been this is
there's been a reason behind it.
Yeah.
So going to the White Sox, I don't want to say they're not making moves. I just don't think they're making enough moves. They have to figure out what the hell they want to be. Do they want to be a World Series contender? If that's the case, when you traded for Frazier, that's great. But you have to do something else. Like Todd Frazier isn't going to turn a 72 win or what is 72, 76 wins, whatever they were, into a 90 win championship contender. He's just not going to do it. At this point, all they're praying for is, God, I hope the guys we signed last year are better than they were, or the guys we signed 2 years ago are better than they were last year, LaRoche, Cabrera, etc. Which leads me to the Bulls, who I've gotten into many debates about these guys, and I just go back to, people always want to tell me it's like, well, the NBA is really hard to be competitive or, to become a title contender because you have to get, that one player or those 2 players, those superstar type players, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, et cetera. Like you have to get those guys. Well, my concept is if you don't have those guys, as a GM, your job is to find a way to get those guys. And that's by the same way the Cubs did it, by getting assets. Not trading Pau Gasol is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen a GM in any sport do. This is a 37-year-old center who, mind you, our wonderful GM is calling part of his core. A 37-year-old center is part of his core. So there's a 37-year-old.
The core of the 8th seed in the East, mind you.
Barely tied
Right.
at the 8th seed.
If they're talking about the core and the Bulls are
and
sitting
again,
2 games behind Toronto or Cleveland for the 1 and 2 seed, great. I'm not gonna mince words there. You don't have a core.
Yeah, right.
You have basketball hell.
And there's injuries and blah blah blah. Like Tibbs didn't have those, whatever. But not trading him, even if it's the reported trade that they said. And again, I don't obviously take it for what it is. It was Gasol and Snell for Ben McLemore, Kostas Koufis or whatever his name is, the center, and then they were going to get less protections on that Kings first round pick.
Why do you not do that?
Right. That
it makes no sense whatsoever.
Because especially with a team like the Kings. The Kings who are basketball stupid.
Yeah. They have arguably a top 4 player on their team, and they can't find a way to even squeak in as an 8 seed.
And look at and I think a great comp here is go to Boston and look at Danny Ainge. He looked at the end of the Big Three era, and he got a number one unprotected pick in this upcoming draft.
Oh yeah, he got 3 first rounders, but
he got 3 first round. But the prize is this pick.
The prize might be in 3 years when they have it again, because when are the Nets going to get good again?
couldn't agree more. But he looked at that and went, "Yep, here's how you rebuild." And he went into the deadline going, "Man, they had a deal on the table with Philadelphia to trade their first round pick for Okafor, and it didn't end up going through. But that's an opportunity to turn, an asset into an all-star there.
It's about you can't, and I think this is what it comes back to is it's status quo. And I don't want to sit here and say that that's definitely their style, but you look at who those teams are owned by, and they don't want to be that bad. That early 2000 Bulls run where they were just atrocious just sits in the back of Reinsdorf's head all the time, and he's saying that can't happen again to either of my teams. So they're going to continue to build on the fly, and pray to God that they figure it out.
And there's nothing wrong in my mind with trying to build on the fly, but you also have to be able to recognize when things are falling apart. And that's the Bulls' biggest issue, is the fact that you have you got Paul Gasol, who is, what'd you say, 36, 37 years old? 37 years old. Set to be, widely known that he is going to decline his option and hit free agency this offseason. You know that. You can't. I can't fathom why either Gar or Pax could sit there and think to themselves that this is a guy that when we see ourselves winning a championship again, that he's part of that picture.
So
I don't see it. Absolutely not at all. It's just the Bulls are so backwards in this. They're single-handedly the most frustrating team in Chicago.
So let's go to our text from Saturday night, because we watched maybe one of the best regular season games of the last 10 years.
Oh, without a doubt.
On Saturday, the Thunder Warrior game. And one of the first things I texted both you guys was, the Bulls aren't even close.
No.
You look at that game, the Bulls couldn't win a game in a series against either of those teams.
I'll even go, the Cavs are obviously the class of the East. I don't think the Cavs hold Oklahoma City, Golden State, San Antonio. I won't quite say Clippers yet, but I don't think the Cavs are in that class. I think the Cavs get run out of the gym against either of those two teams.
The Cavs, I think, take any of those teams to 6 at best.
Max. Yeah, at best.
And I watched that game, and I'm watching Steph Curry, and I know Steph Curry is a once-in-a-generation shooter. And I know Steph Curry is unbelievable. But Steph Curry was also the 7th pick in his draft.
Yeah.
The 7th pick in his draft. So you're telling me you get some of those protections off the Kings pick, and now in addition to you, maybe now you're in the lottery, right? And you're sitting with the 7th and the 10th pick in the lottery, 7th and the 12th pick in the lottery. You're telling me that you can't get, anybody that says, oh, well, you got to get top 3. The 76ers are proving to everybody you don't need the number 1 pick. You don't need that. Doesn't necessarily guarantee you anything. Steph Curry was the 7th pick in the draft. You can find unbelievable talent. Even you look at some of the other players that have been awesome over the last 2-3 decades. Even Kobe Bryant. Bryant was something like the 12th pick or something in the draft. I thought maybe 8 to 12, somewhere in there.
I think it would have been even lower than that.
He might have been. But you look at that and you go, it's not a necessity to necessarily bottom out. But what you need to do is you have to maximize the number of ping pong balls you have in the lottery. And in addition to that, even if you can't get in the top 3, getting those lottery picks and having a chance at any of the top 10 guys coming into the game is where you want to be. And the Bulls had a chance to do that. It would seem
And I don't know if the Bulls feel like, because they found a guy like Jimmy Butler late. They found a guy like Taj was later in the first round, right? I
He
mean,
was like he was 22, whatever number he is. I think he's
yeah,
22.
22, yeah. So I don't know if they feel like, well, hey, we could find a guy like Jimmy Butler who's a two-time All-Star, which that's a great find on their part. I give them credit for that. I give them credit for Taj. Taj has been a very good player for them. He's obviously not an All-Star level kind of guy, but he's a good guy. He's a guy that's very good coming off the bench.
You know what? You keep saying the word, Matt. He's a guy.
But he is.
All
He
Taj
is.
just a guy.
Well, this whole Bulls team is filled with guys. Jimmy's about the only non-guy. I guess McDermott's been showing some flashes, which
No,
has been nice
McDermott's
to
still
see.
a guy.
But you wouldn't even let me finish. I was
Sorry.
going to say he's still a guy. But it is. This Bulls team's filled with guys. I've always liked Jimmy's game. I liked Pau Gasol 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's just, they're so maddening. They're so frustrating. I'm just looking at this roster right now, and it's just pure hot garbage.
You could still like Paul today. You still like Paul Gasol today.
Paul Gasol is the king of empty statistics. All his numbers are just shit. Yeah, he gets them all against shit teams. You know, he
because
gets
for some reason teams still don't think he can knock down those jumpers, and people don't guard him, which blows my mind. And he's been in the league for how long, and yet people still leave him wide open. Like
because I would let a guy shoot a 20-foot 2-point shot all day long because he's not going to hit him more than a 50% clip, and you're going to win the game.
Yeah.
Like, take another step back and at least make it a 3-pointer and make some sort of difference.
Yeah. So by the way, Kobe Bryant, 13th pick.
Yeah, I just saw that.
So it's not. So that's what it really comes down to for me. It's not.
It's just self-awareness of what your team is, and they don't get it. Like, you said, you didn't mention Derrick Rose, and for how much I don't like that guy, he's still got talent. So Derrick Rose, I'll say, is good. Jimmy Butler is good. Jimmy Butler and Derrick Rose together, not good. Like,
it can't function. It cannot function together.
You have a little LeBron Wade thing happening there from the first year at Miami. It's worse because they're not as good as those guys. But the point I'm trying to make is that first year in Miami, it was, okay, this is my turn. Okay, now it's your turn. Now it's my turn. Their games don't complement each other.
You can't have one guy pout when the other guy's taking over a game. And at the same time, Derek has to understand when he's not shooting well, which is quite often, and he's obviously driving more now, but when he's not shooting well, he can't just sit there and chuck up 16 shots and go, 6 for 16 or 6 for 18 from the floor. Like, you're not going to win when you're doing that. Like, not in Hoiberg's offense where you're just going to keep letting the other team get possessions because you don't play any defense and you're shooting when there's 15, 16 seconds left on the clock. Like, you're not going to win games doing that. And there's just zero self-awareness by that front office right now. Even talking about bringing back Noah, like, what the hell are you doing? What is he going to do?
And they've already proven that Pau and Joakim can't play together. So why would you even entertain the idea of trying to bring the two back? It's frustrating. I can't even we can't even put words out there that make sense because it doesn't make sense what they do. I have no idea what they think they're doing, where they think they're going. I don't know if they're just naive that they think that the East is so bad. Well, if the East is so bad, you shouldn't be hanging on to the 8th spot right now.
Agreed. You shouldn't. And I feel like as long as they make the playoff, Garpax keeps his job.
Oh, they're going to keep their job for as long as they want because until Reinsdorf dies.
Well, the problem too is
I'm not even making a joke because Reinsdorf is just too damn loyal to people. It's crazy that Pax has been around this long.
I would say Paxson's a lot safer than Foreman because Paxson is a goddamn cockroach and protects himself like you wouldn't believe. What's going to happen?
He did it with Vinny Del Negro. He did it with Thibs. He's going
to do it with Gar because if the Bulls honestly somehow miss the playoffs, they're not going to have a choice but to make some sort of move. Hoiberg ain't going anywhere after signing a 5-year contract. Pax can just say Gar didn't get it done at the deadline. He should have done this. When we all know where he's getting his orders from. So,
yeah, it's bad. It's bad on a lot of fronts, and I think it's just you look at the two teams that play in the United Center, and you have a team that's won 3 cups in 6 years. And their eye is on a 4th cup in 7, and the Bulls, who haven't been past the Eastern Conference Finals since 1998 are just they're fine with middling, and that's the long and short of it, and that's the sadness there. So let's go to some closing thoughts and wrap this up because we're hitting 70 minutes, and it's time to go. So Matt, we'll start with you. Closing thought for tonight.
Closing thought. Fun list. I enjoy these lists. Another closing thought. Bulls are terrible, and nothing's going to change until Gar packs are gone. That's all I got today. I'm like really mad right now about this Bulls stuff. I didn't realize it would get me so fired up. I'm like sitting over here all pissed off now.
This is like me like every day whenever I see the Bulls.
Yeah, good thing they're not on tonight.
Yeah.
Ben, closing thoughts, anything?
No, nothing new. I think all the trades that were on there were pretty good. And again, just the Bulls, man. I hate Gar packs because they make me hate the Bulls. I hate watch the Bulls. I want them to lose because I think that's the only way there's going to be a change.
This is like the Bears.
And it sucks
and
rooting
last
for
year.
losses, obviously.
Yeah.
This is like but it's been going on for 12 years instead of one season.
Yeah, there's a lot of hate watching going on right now with the Bulls. It's and it's just, can they do something to do even worse the next night? I'll tell you my closing thought. Steph Curry is out of his damn mind.
Unbelievable.
NBA 2K16 can't even replicate that guy. That's how unbelievable he's shooting, which is just outrageous because, God, they like keep running sims of seasons and they just can't get Curry's numbers to match because Curry is just shooting the ball at a rate that it just has never existed. So watching that performance on Saturday night, capping it off with that 32-footer for the win was just awesome. That's what you root for as a sports fan. So my closing thought is Oscar Robertson and Phil Jackson and every other old-time player that's saying, oh, the NBA is different, suck it. Steph Curry is the real deal, and he is clowning all of you. So you agree with that, guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Completely.
All right, good deal. Suck it, Oscar Robertson.
And Phil Jackson for your stupid comment.
Yeah, what was that with Raheem? Oh, my God.
Just terrible. That's a whole show in itself.
It is. All right, so for Ben Russo and Matt Urich, I am Scott Sternal. Thanks for listening. Remember, you can listen to us on Stitcher. You can listen to us on Podbean. You listen to us through the iTunes app. Be sure to subscribe there. We're going to have some good stuff on WordPress. Always check out our Twitter and Facebook pages. We're trying to promote those even more. And next week, we get into the other side of business transactions in the sports world, and that's free agency and the top 10 free agents that shocked us or made us feel real good or real bad when our respective teams did it. So we're going to work on that one for next week. So, again, for Ben Russo and Matt Urich, I'm Scott Sternal. Thanks for listening. Have a great evening.